This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. So, I've never owned an SG, and I was reading an article from Joe Bonamassa that he'd written on the Gibson SG, and by the power of editing and Google search, I'll be able to find that article and show you what it was. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which publication it was for, but an article that he had written, and in it he said that it took him basically 30 years to warm up to the idea of a Gibson SG, and I don't know whether that's normal for other folks as well, but I'm, getting sort of near to my third decade of playing guitar, and the Gibson SG kind of popped up on my radar because today Keith from 5 Watt World is uploading his video, the 10 SG players who changed the world, and essentially he just sent me a message, as he occasionally will, saying, do you want to play an intro for this? Can you get hold of an SG? And I had it in my mind that Francisco from up the road, who I'd met on a jam night maybe 4 years ago, and we chatted on Instagram a bit. He said, if you ever want to borrow, he's got a few vintage Gibson things, and I kind of sent out the bat signal because it's a bat wing pickguard, and just said, would it be possible to borrow this for a few hours? And he said, yeah. And the story of Francisco's, I did a video on this. Basically, it's a 1968 SG Special that at some point got painted black, and for that reason, and it was a bit of a player grade guitar, Francisco was able to buy it for a very good price and kind of return it to its former glory. I did a video on that, and Uncle Larry, who I think is an SG fan for sure, kind of commented on it saying, if you like that guitar, you should try one from a few years prior, because they had a narrow nut, essentially, on the one that I tried. Not a huge issue for me, I don't have massive hands. But yeah, a few years prior, like maybe 1961 to 1964, would have been the kind of holy grail specs of an SG. As you find out with a lot of this vintage guitar stuff, the further you go back, the more specific folks tend to get. So, Keith asked me to do the video. I've been playing that guitar. I borrowed it for a day and did a bunch of playing with it, and kind of it's made me think again, like, why have I never owned one of these? And I think the reason is that growing up, my heroes were sort of Thin Lizzy, Gary Moore, Les Paul players mostly, and then I went through like a shred phase into Ibanez, and then came out of that fresh with a Strat sort of in my early 20s, and that's sort of been the trajectory in general. But thinking about it, I can remember, and let me know in the comments if you can remember the first time you saw an SG being played by anyone. I think that'd be kind of a fun little thing. The first time I remember seeing an SG was in 1999 on Top of the Pops with a band called Semisonic, and they had a song called Secret Smile, and the guy was playing an SG, and I can remember that. I checked it. It checks out as being real. The lead singer of Semisonic was playing an SG on that, and it was 1999. They were on Top of the Pops. That's not stuff that I remembered. I went and googled Semisonic Top of the Pops, obviously. But yeah, I was 10 then, and I would have been playing guitar for a couple of years, and that's kind of imprinted in my head as like the first time that I saw an SG. I wasn't a fan of, or didn't, end up listening to bands like AC/DC or the other kind of SG, what would be the word, adjacent artists at the time, like The Who. I think I kind of skipped as well, just because I was born, through the 90s. It was like the Britpop thing, and not necessarily, I didn't have the internet, did I? That's probably why I wouldn't have heard those things as much as I could easily now. So, yeah, in the introduction there, two kind of interesting SG players by accident. So I started off thinking, right, I'm going to do something like Bubba O'Reilly, The Who, and to do the start thing, which I was trying to sort of emulate what you might get at the start of Bubba O'Reilly, which has that sequencer thing going on. And I was thinking, how could I achieve that with the guitar? I was thinking, right, dotted delay might get me somewhere close. Kind of happy coincidence. The Edge, also an SG player, kind of sounds like the Edge. So that's kind of cool. My favourite players who've played an SG, Eric Johnson, you occasionally see him with an SG. I'm not sure why or what his thought process is when he picks that up and plays it. But throughout the decades, you can see Eric Johnson playing with an SG sometimes. Not often a Les Paul. I don't know if I've ever seen him gigging with a Les Paul. So that's a little bit odd, but an SG sometimes. And Alan Holdsworth, kind of in the early days, was an SG player. You see him playing with like a white SG with gold hardware. Sometimes 3 pickups, sometimes 2. But yeah, Alan Holdsworth. And I think that's kind of what I think about the SG as. It's aesthetically not my favourite Gibson, but to play, especially if it has like a vibrola, so you don't get the neck dive thing going on, which is the one sort of downside that you sometimes see about the SG. But typically an SG is going to be about £2 lighter than a Les Paul. Sit to your body quite comfortably. Ergonomically very easy to play. Great upper fret access. All of this really positive stuff, and the one negative maybe the neck dive. But for me personally, I don't have the same kind of visual thing because it's a red guitar. Some parts of it I don't think are quite as beautiful as a Les Paul, but I think that's been the reason. It's really mostly kind of shallow and just looks wise is the reason that I've not ended up playing an SG much, where I've gravitated towards a Les Paul. And I've probably found out that Les Paul style guitars aren't in general that well suited to me, whereas an SG actually still feels pretty comfortable, easy to play, sounds pretty good. The thing that Joe Bonamassa was saying was that to get it closer to his Les Paul type tone, he kind of rolls the tone off to about 5, because the SG seems to be a brighter guitar. That guitar Francisco's had P90s in it and was really well suited to me anyway, because I'm generally a single coil player, so to have something brighter is good for me. I guess, thinking about it, the Revstar is not that dissimilar from an SG, right? You've got a double cut, it's not symmetrical, but it's kind of, if there was a guitar that is closest to, it would be that, right? So I don't know, let me know in the comments your favourite SG players if you've got them, the first time you saw an SG being played. Have you owned an SG? Do you still own one? Which is better out of an SG and a Les Paul? I'd love to know your thoughts. And yeah, I'll catch you in another video soon. I was using Helix Native for the intro. and the Eric Lead 2023 preset is where I ended up for the lead stuff. I will jump into the folder and add in the kind of 2 bits at the start as well, kind of the hooey dotted stuff if you want that. Cheers for stopping by, and cheers to Keith for the inspiration.